The Last of Us Season 1 seemingly came out of nowhere, sweeping up awards and smashing records left, right and centre. But for those who had played the games, its success came at no real surprise at all. The story of Ellie and Joel is an incredibly powerful one, and if you haven't already, I cannot encourage you enough to pick up the games. But today I'd like to focus on the TV show adaptation and delve into how this show was thrust into the spotlight, becoming HBO's biggest success in history, how it shook up the zombie genre forever, and how it rewrote the script of how a video game adaptation should be done. Yes, I'm looking at you, Resident Evil. So, grab some popcorn, sit back, relax, and let's look into why The Last of Us Season 1 is a modern day masterpiece. Now, like I alluded to in the intro, the story of Joel and Ellie is just incredible. Joel is a middle-aged man who loses his biological daughter during the outset of the virus that tears through humanity, and he is partnered up on a mission to deliver Ellie to the Fireflies, a militant group who are locked in a fierce war against the US government's Fedra. And to start off with, Joel views Ellie purely as cargo. She is just his ticket to getting a functional car battery to go and find his brother Tommy. And although 20 odd years have passed since Joel's daughter's death, he is still very much grieving. But gradually throughout their journey, they form one of the most heartwarming dynamics in fiction. The normally closed off Joel starts to open up to the adventurous and outgoing Ellie, and by the end of our journey, Joel sees Ellie as his own daughter. It's this very relationship that sets this show apart, especially from other quote-unquote horror shows. The focus on character-driven storylines and fleshing out individuals works wonders, and the horror being the infected and the cannibals take mostly a back seat, shining through only when necessary. It's not a show that prioritises gore or jump scares, even though it does have it in drabs, and it doesn't rely on said features to excite its audience. It builds up tension through well-crafted storylines, making it stand out in the heavily oversaturated zombie genre, and it uses the proven successful formula that the early seasons of The Walking Dead used, that being dialogue then horror rather than the other way around. And the lead actors Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey do a phenomenal job. There are multiple laugh out loud moments throughout the show courtesy of the two's relationship. It feels natural and also serves as an emotional break from a lot of the heavy hitting stuff within the show. And the two characters save each other in different ways. Joel protects Ellie physically, but Ellie saves Joel mentally. She brings Joel back from years of isolation and emotional numbness, and she gives him a reason to survive and keep going in the post-apocalyptic landscape. It's just beautiful, and concludes in Joel's realisation that the Fireflies plan to kill Ellie in order to try and form a cure to save humanity. But Joel decides to save Ellie, and although it's a selfish decision, it's incredibly human, as he loves her too much to lose her, even if it means dooming humanity forever. Also, a little side note, we have no idea that the cure would have worked, so I'm with you on your decision, Joel. But that point kind of takes away from the stakes of the finale, but I think you did the right thing. But anyway, it's a natural bond built on the foundations of trauma, loss, and the deep-rooted human desire to survive. They have their ups and downs, but they would die for each other. And it's this very relationship that acts as the core of the show. The Last of Us Season 1 only consists of 9 episodes, but it's not just Joel and Ellie who receive all the screen time. The show is amazing at giving us, the audience, these almost standalone episodes, where the writers flesh out new characters, and they make the world feel so expansive and lived in. In just 9 episodes, they not only manage to tell the story of Joel and Ellie, but they depict Bill and Frank's beautiful tale that ends in poetic tragedy, the soul-destroying story of Henry and Sam, the backstory of how Ellie was bit and her relationship with Riley, the story of David and the darkness of survival in the post-apocalyptic landscape, and of course Tess and Tommy. There are so many characters in this show that almost each episode, bar from Joel and Ellie, we meet a whole new cast. Yet it doesn't feel unfamiliar and keep you asking questions like, who is this? In fact, the writing is so good that these characters fit seamlessly into the overall story, whilst learning of their motivations and why they are making the decisions that we see on screen. It all hints to a deeper history, one that makes the world feel incredibly real. I would really like to highlight episode 5 in particular here, and the tragic tale of Henry and Sam. Although appearing in just the one episode, well technically 2 if you count the last scene from episode 4, but in just 59 minutes of screen time, we meet Henry, a man who is in hiding with his deaf younger brother Sam, but he's not just protecting Sam, but also carrying the guilt of betraying Kathleen's brother, the woman who is hunting them both down. And having his younger brother Sam be deaf only strengthens the emotional bond between the two characters, feeling so intimate and vulnerable. And in many ways their relationship mirrors Joel and Ellie's, showing us another version of love and sacrifice in this brutal world. But the reason I highlight this episode is Kathleen and Perry, the antagonists of episode 5, receive their own backstory. Unlike in the game, you're not just being hunted by some nameless killers, you watch a woman driven to the very edge, blinded by rage after the death of her own brother, hunt down the culprits of who essentially killed him. Okay, maybe Sam didn't, but still, she's hunting down the people she believes are responsible, and you can somewhat sympathise with that. But it's this little bit of backstory which makes the whole episode feel morally grey. There are no purely good or evil people in this world, just desperate survivors. And on top of this, we see probably the most intense scene in the entire show, as the infected erupt from the tunnels underneath the city, and of course introduce us to the bloater. Simply put, imagine Shaquille O'Neal mixed with Usain Bolt. Now picture said image, sprinting at you, full speed, trying to tear you apart. Yes, it's complete nightmare fuel. And if I saw this thing running at me, I'm just flat out accepting my fate. But it's the build-up of Kathleen's hunt culminating in this scene right here that raises the stakes. The horror element shines through and complements the largely character-driven storyline from the previous 50 minutes of the episode. It feels like we as the audience have earned this action scene, rather than it being thrown in for the sake of jump scares and gore. I'd also like to mention the scenic storytelling within this show. Specifically in episode 3, we see Joel and Ellie gaze upon the wreckage of an aircraft, with a pit of burnt bodies just around the corner. Now the show doesn't explicitly tell us what happened here, but rather leaves it up to the audience's mind to come to their own conclusion of what unfolded that day. Another example of this is the lone infected person Ellie finds underground in the same episode. Crushed by rubble, she puts an end to the creature. But how did it get there? Why was it down there alone? And how was it infected? Ultimately, we will never get the answers to all these questions, but the show just sprinkles the scenery with small clues for us to piece together what happened that day, leaving it down to our own interpretation. It's incredibly interesting, and it's reminiscent of the notes you can find in the games, which all tell different stories. And the last thing I'd like to highlight in this section is the character of David. He represents the worst case scenario of survival, where there is barely any trace of humanity left in him. What makes this even worse is David appears helpful and reasonable at first, until we slowly learn he's a cannibal cult leader who's also a nonce.
I'm gonna lose my job!
David's community is starving, and instead of looking for a real solution, he resorts to cannibalism, but keeps it a secret from his people. The character works so well because he offers us that final showdown. Unlike Kathleen, Perry or Marlene, David has no redeeming factors and there is no morally grey area. He is, by all sense of the word, a monster created by this world. Whilst the others are doing what they do because they believe it's right, David is just a freak. He's a power-hungry sociopath who doesn't want to just kill Ellie, but also own her, which is absolutely terrifying, especially given the fact we see Ellie has to deal with David all by herself as Joel lays injured. And although Ellie successfully kills him and reunites with Joel, we see this moment scars her forever. And although his death in episode 8 is incredibly satisfying, Ellie will never be the same. David is by far the worst person we meet in the show, and the fact Ellie manages to save herself is not only huge for her character development, but also Joel's, as he fights through his injury, doing everything in his power to reunite with her, showing us just how far Joel's come since episode 1. And the moment of the two of them embracing outside the burning building is just beautiful. Now, not only does the show manage to incorporate the quite frankly majestic visuals from the game, and adapt them to the big screen, but it also has paved the way for other video games to start getting their own TV show adaptations. It's opened the eyes and the pockets of streaming services. Since The Last of Us TV show release just 2 years ago, we have already seen Fallout be adapted and receive glowing reviews, and I have no doubt that in 10 years we will look back and see a wave of successful TV shows all based on games, stemming from the very success of The Last of Us. Yes, albeit it wasn't the first game adapted into a TV show, but it is by far the most successful, and it proves there is huge money to be made if done correctly. I think The Last of Us has shown big corporations and streaming sites that many games actually have incredibly crafted storylines that quite clearly translate into a good viewing experience. And unlike past game adaptations, The Last of Us hit that sweet spot. They didn't stray too far away from the source material like Resident Evil or Halo did, both receiving poor to mediocre reviews from fans. It made tweaks to improve the story for television, but it respected the story of the game. So it not only expanded the audience for the franchise, but it also kept the most loyal and diehard fans happy. And I think The Last of Us has done a world of good to prove that video game adaptations aren't just a low budget cash grab, but can in fact be a true work of art. Like I alluded to earlier, The Last of Us manages to shake up the zombie genre, and the only way I can describe it is comparing it to the early seasons of The Walking Dead. Albeit the two shows have vastly different plots and characters, but both of them, in an extremely oversaturated market being the zombie genre, managed to stand head and shoulders above their peers. And it's because the shows are made by the characters within them, and not the zombies themselves. With The Walking Dead seemingly coming to an end imminently, well, at least the mainline story that is, there's a huge gap in the market, and The Last of Us has more than capitalised on this. It has put itself in a position to dominate not just the zombie genre, but television as a whole. HBO has a goldmine on their hands, and although there are only 2 games as of now, it's hard to not see them making more than 2 seasons of this television show. We could be looking at the rebirth of zombie mania, courtesy of The Last of Us. Its more grounded and realistic approach to the virus and the post-apocalyptic landscape I think appeals to a wider range of people, as there is actually a fair bit of science within the show, meaning it's not too far-fetched for people to be engaged in. So for me, I think The Last of Us could be the next TV juggernaut. In truth, I hold both the video games and the TV show very dearly to my heart, as it reminds me of a time in university where me and my close friends would all meet up every week to play the game and watch the newest episode of the show. Shout out to Harvey, Adam, Afiz and Michael. But the nostalgia this series provides, even if those moments were just 2 years ago, is immense. And in my opinion, Season 1 manages to encapsulate the magic of the games, incorporating it into one of the best adaptations I've ever seen, with phenomenal performances from every actor involved. And yes, Isabella Ramsey doesn't look like Ellie from the games, but to all you fans screaming for a recast, honestly, grow up. She was great in Season 1, so have some faith in her performance for Season 2. But the whole show is special to me. It bulks out the story of the game by giving us new characters like Kathleen and Perry, and does justice to not just Ellie and Joel's relationship, but also shows us the evil in the world with characters like David. It is a truly amazing season of television, and somehow manages to do justice to one of the greatest games of all time, which is probably some of the highest praise I could ever give it. I honestly think The Last of Us could be the next huge TV show, and I am so excited for Season 2. Spoiler alert coming up, turn off now if you don't want to know, but how they deal with Joel's death could be a make or break moment for the franchise. So I'll be watching with eagle eyes and probably bucket loads of tears streaming down my face. So for me, that's why The Last of Us Season 1 is the perfect adaptation. But with that being said, let me know if you guys are excited for Season 2 down below in the comments, and thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, as we are closing in on 10,000 subscribers, which just feels insane to say. But again, thank you all for the support recently, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.